Oh.
Right. So we're going to have a little chat about Uber on the way.
Just let me put my phone on silent, or we could have an interrupted chat.
Oh, sorry.
Good afternoon, folks. Where are we going to?
The Savoy, isn't it?
We're going to the Savoy Hotel on the promenade.
Savoy, smash it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sea cabs.
It is indeed, yeah. Is that, I'm a mistaken, is that you, Anne?
That is indeed Anne, yes.
I'll have to put you to my memoirs when I write my book. Quite a few famous in here over the years.
I bet you have, yeah. Who've you had in?
Oh, quite a few politicians through the party conferences, quite a few actors for the theatres.
Yeah.
Quite a few dancers for the dance.
Because Strictly comes up here every year.
Yeah, Strictly, yeah. Well, Blackpool used to produce a lot of stars, didn't it?
It did, in fact, it did indeed, yeah.
Why do you think that stopped?
It's just how the town's been going. Well, as you know, it's always on the news for being an area economically and socially deprived. And at the minute, the feeling in the taxi trade is getting to boiling point. You know, throughout the years we've done what the council had wanted to do. We've tried to improve the standard of the cars. We've gone on NVQs for customer training.
Yep.
We've done safeguarding courses. We've done Alzheimer and dementia courses to make us aware. And
Is that not a good thing, though?
yeah, oh yeah, brilliant, yeah, good, yeah. But at the minute, we've got a massive influx of out-of-town cars. All our drivers are local, live in Blackpool, they earn the money in Blackpool and spend the money in Blackpool. And at the moment, we've got all these out-of-town cars coming, taking our work, and we're getting absolutely nothing from the police or the local flag licenses. We've sent them dozens and dozens of videos and clips. We go to the police with a photograph of a taxi plate from a different borough that's 3-4 months out of date. The police say, oh, it's nothing to do with us, it's a licensing problem. We go to licensing and licensing say we can't do anything because it's not licensed in our borough. We just feel absolutely abandoned.
So these are, let me get this right, driver, these are uninsured drivers coming in from out of town, picking up jobs when they shouldn't be doing. They bring a job into town, a person into town, and then they're getting more jobs while they're here. Is that what's happening?
Correct to some degree. I wouldn't say they're not all uninsured, but there has been a case locally. We're just trying to find out the details of that, which would be a massive problem for them. But we've had drivers with wrong badges when people have checked on them. You know, the badge to show is nothing like the driver. It's just we've got no support. I mean, years ago, Blackpool, you know, when I've been to trade meetings, it was an ideal blue point for other boroughs to follow. But the last 8 years, is it Mark, is it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
The last 8 years, it's just gone, it's gone really, really poor.
And what, so, you know, I'm running in the local elections, the general election, for Reform UK. I'm the candidate for Blackpool South. And so, what do you think that I could do to help the taxi drivers deal with this issue that you've got with these out-of-town drivers coming in?
Well, if we could force the police to come out more and take action when there's things going on and the licensing, but also the thing called intended use policy. I believe if that's attached to people's operator's licence.
Intended use?
Intended use.
Yeah.
That means if one's licensed in Sefton, that means he intends to use that in Sefton.
Yeah.
So if he's over here 6 or 7 days a week, he's not obviously. He's obviously got that under false pretences. But
Right.
if it's intended use, we can do something about it.
What would you suggest, Dan?
Well, I think it really is a matter for the local council and for the licensing authorities. And it's not good enough to say there's nothing we can do, because there is always something that you can do.
Yeah.
I just feel you may be giving up slightly too easily.
Here we go. Fighting talk. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
What I mean by that is that, you say you go to the police, they say there's nothing we can do, then you say you go to the licensing authorities, they say there's nothing we can do. The answer has to be that the buck stops somewhere, so there is somebody who can do something about it. So when you have a new MP on Thursday week, you write to him so that you're one of the first letters in his in tray. And you say to him, you ask him a very simple question. You don't set out the grievance, you just ask him a simple question. Who is responsible for licensing out-of-town taxis in Blackpool?
Thank you for that.
That's interesting.
So just a simple crunch question to which he must supply an answer.
Yeah. We can get the people who are, the stakeholders, if you like, together and discuss this about a way. I mean, other towns, I know that Howard Cox, he runs Fairfuel, and also he's the Reform candidate in London, isn't he?
Yeah.
And Howard Cox made great inways with the London cabbies and helped a lot with the Uber situation in the city. So we could get Howard we could get some advice from Howard. He also put a video out about the Blackpool cabbies. Did you see that?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, so Howard Cox is a great guy to get connected to, and we can talk to Howard and get his advice about what he did in London and why the cabbies all support Howard. He's done a lot for the London city taxi drivers.
It's nice to know somebody's getting some help. It's certainly not getting any here.
Well, you've got my word on it, and I say that to you. I'll make sure that I fight the battle, good fight. That you need somebody in there that's willing to help these drivers, that understands the plight, really. C cabs, if I'm not right in saying, I mean, you've been around for a long time.
Oh, yes, 80 years or so.
Well, there you are, you see. So 80 years here in Blackpool. How many drivers have you got on the firm?
Probably about 550, something like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
550 drivers, then you've got the admin and the staff. So, like, these people are all going to be relying on this company to continue to do as well as it always has, and the customers here. Now, I don't know whether you know this, but part of the business model of Uber, these big companies as well that come in and take over, is they subsidise the drivers as well, so they can compete and they can undercut all the locals. And this is happening all across the country. Subsidised drivers.
I've never yet had a good experience with Uber. I've tried 3 times in my life, once in Melbourne,
Right.
twice in London, and on every single occasion I was greeted with a complete amateur who couldn't find his way.
Yeah. And not also, so part of, I don't want to scare you any more than it already is bothering you, but part of the problem you've got as taxi drivers, local drivers, you've got Uber subsidising their journeys. So what happens is an Uber driver would charge £4 for a Saturday night. It might cost £6 in a taxi, but they'll get subsidised as well for that fare. And the idea behind that is to get rid of the competition, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It's a business model that they use. And they don't just use it here in Blackpool, they use it all across the world. And they also do it with food delivery as well. So a lot of people are complaining about this. Not only that, some of the drivers, they swap the licences and things like that, don't they?
Yeah.
So you don't even know sometimes who the driver is. I would say to people, support your local taxi firm, because if you don't, then in 12 months' time you're not going to have a local taxi firm. And then what happens is they raise all the fares, then the prices go up, the subsidised fares go. And the idea behind it is, quite frankly, to steamroller all over the top of local businesses all the way across the UK. We need to do something about it.
Yeah, I just feel for the local drivers. Like
Same here.
Spend the money in Blackpool. And not only that, us as a company, we do a lot of sponsorship, sponsor Blackpool Football Club.
I've seen that at the games, yeah.
Sponsor netball teams, we sponsor kiddies, football teams. This year sponsored the first girls football team.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, we do a lot of local sponsorship with, local community, netball teams, football teams,
Right.
dart teams, snooker teams. The list is endless, but obviously, I think the locals need probably a bit of educating on that, because if that business plan is correct, what you were saying, obviously, all that sponsorship will just stop.
Yeah, oh yeah, and also those 500 drivers have got families, rent to pay, mortgages. I mean, it's a big loss. We can't let that go away. And what we want as residents, what I want as a resident, is a taxi firm, local taxi firm with drivers that I can trust and that I know are going to keep me family safe and me safe, quite frankly. And sometimes you're getting in cars with strangers, and it's a bit worrying, isn't it?
It is indeed. Anyway, we're nearly there now. So
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
lucky that I got the job to pick you up. Thank you for your time.
I
No,
was
that's
happy.
okay. And don't forget, Thursday morning, write to your MP. Friday
Thursday,
morning, rather.
yeah.
Friday morning, write to your MP. You'll know who he is.
I'm expecting a few letters.
And rest assured there will be.
But as I say, just ask that crunch question.
The Savoy Hotel. There's your close protection, Anne.
Yeah.
He's nice lad.
Are you okay there?
Yeah. Oh, long way down.
Thank you for using C-Cab, Sam. Good luck.
Yeah. Good luck, you.
Good luck with
Yeah.
your phone.
Yeah, and we'll make sure we get a chat, especially after Friday. We'll have a chat. I'll come and
Rest
see you.
assured the letters coming.
Take care.
Ready, Mark?
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Hello.
Lovely to meet you, Anne. Thank you.
Please, let me welcome to the stage, Anne Widdecombe.
Testing, testing. Your mic doesn't work. It's a very great pleasure to be here today, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Reform are going to win, aren't they? Yeah! That wasn't too bad. But that will only guarantee that we make the opposition. So let me ask you again, this time I'd like you to think of government. Reform are going to win, aren't they? Now that's it. And that's the level of energy which we have to keep up if we are going to win on Thursday week. And we have to keep it up until 10 o'clock on Thursday week. And at 10:01 it's too late. And what we haven't done by that time, we won't be able to do. And there is absolutely everything to play for. We're ahead of the Tories now in the polls. That means we are the effective opposition. And if we can build on that, then when the election is over, we can become the real parliamentary opposition. And that is what we need to do. And then we can hold Starmageddon to account. And then we can build on the sort of Britain that we want until at the next general election, which can't be any later than 2029, at that general election, we don't worry about being the opposition, we will be the government. And we will be the government for one very simple reason. We are the only party, and I do mean this, the only party that is basing our policies on just 2 words: common sense. Let's look at the health service. We have known for years, and successive Conservative Prime Ministers, they've had so many I've nearly lost track, but successive Conservative Prime Ministers have said, we haven't got enough doctors. Okay, we haven't got enough doctors. What do you do if you haven't got enough doctors? You train more doctors. And yet this government has operated a cap on the numbers of doctors in training, and it has not raised that cap. And now suddenly at the gates of the general election, it says, oh dear, we'd better say we're going to train more doctors. Well, why didn't they do it when they had the chance? And the answer to that is a lack of sense. Now, common sense says you haven't got enough doctors, you need more. So reform will not put any cap on the numbers of doctors in training. All we will require is that they are sufficiently able to take on that course. That is all we will require. But that won't be the end of the matter, because it isn't just recruitment, it's also retention. The poor souls leave the NHS as fast as they can. What we've got to do is to keep doctors in the NHS. So what does common sense say? It says, well, if you want to encourage a particular pattern of behaviour, you offer an incentive to people to behave in that way. So therefore our policy is that if a doctor has qualified and then gives us 10 full years in the NHS after qualification, we will remit all that doctor's student debt. Which means that they will have trained for free. That is what you do if you want to encourage people not only to join the NHS but to stay in it. And we make a similar offer to nurses and patient-facing frontline workers, not the chaps setting the targets, but the people actually delivering health services. We have said that providing they give us 5 full years in the NHS, we will then remit 3 years' worth of taxes. Now that is worth having. And while we're on the subject of student debt, where is the common sense in running a system where up to 80% of students never repay their debt? And the reason they don't repay it is not because they're feckless, it's because that debt increases with an interest rate of 7%. And it becomes impossible to pay it off and to run a mortgage and a family and all the other responsibilities that people have. So we have said we cannot afford, and we will not promise, unlike some other parties, we will not promise to abolish student tuition fees, but what we will abolish is the interest on those fees. So that students will leave university owing X amount of money, and that amount of money will never increase. And that seems to me, again, very, very basic common sense. Now let's look at immigration. Rishi Sunak, He has a plan. He's had a plan ever since he's been Prime Minister. It's called Rwanda. The only problem with this plan is it hasn't been translated into any action. And yet he's still promising Rwanda. Now, common sense says, that's fine, you can have that as your plan A, but common sense says, if plan A is being derailed, you go for a plan B. So reform offers both a plan A and a plan B. Plan A is to stop the boats at the point at which they're about to enter British waters. And we are entitled in international law to refuse entry to our waters to anybody who is endeavouring to enter them without our permission. So it can already be done. Say the naysayers. Well, you may be entitled to do it, but actually it's impossible. If it's so impossible, why did Australia do it? If it's so impossible, how did Belgium do it? If it is possible for other countries to do it, it is possible for us to do it, if only we have the will to do it. But we're sensible. And we say, OK, some of those boats will still get through. Well, we're not just going to sit back and let it happen. We've got a plan B. And plan B is that if they do arrive here unlawfully, we will house them not in hotels from which they can come and go, but in secure reception centres so that we know where they are. And we can process them that much more quickly because we know where they are and we can deal with queries on the spot. And then the message that goes out will be, if you come to Britain with a false claim, you will be detained, you will be dealt with quickly, you will be sent back, and nobody's going to pay £15,000 to a human trafficking agency for that. So yes, it can be done. It won't be done by Tuesday afternoon, but it will be done quickly. And it will be done with will and with determination. And then where is the common sense in teaching children that there are 142 genders when they're only ever going to meet 2 of them? There is no sense in that at all. And what a distortion of education it is to teach children what to think rather than how to think. For example, when schools are teaching the history of the British Empire, you teach the pupils the good things, you teach them the bad things, and you let them perform the analysis to decide what they think. That's education. That is real, rigorous education, and that is what we need in our schools. And common sense says that making a travesty of education is actually not a sound investment in Britain's future. We need bright, well-educated, rigorously thinking future generations. And again, that's not something that we can deliver by Tuesday afternoon, but it jolly well is something that we can deliver fairly quickly, because we will take control of what is being taught. And we will restore the supremacy of parents when it comes to delivering sex education, particularly to primary school children. All these things are based on common sense, but the other thing we're going to have a look at is equality, diversity and inclusion. Equality is a very funny thing. Why is it that the gender equality laws protect women but not men? Why is it that the racial equality laws protect blacks but not whites? Why is it that the religious equality laws protect everybody except Christians? If you are white, male and Christian, you should be absolutely equal in a true democracy to somebody who is black, female and of another religion. And we will see that equality actually means that. And one of the ways we'll do that is to get rid of all those posts in the civil service and elsewhere which call themselves equality, diversity and inclusion and take up millions in resources to deliver grievance. That is what we will do. So we have a programme for Britain, and where is the common sense in saying we want to get everybody working, oh, but we're going to tax you up to the eyebrows? Where is the sense in that? If you want people to work, you've got to provide the incentive to work. So, as I think is very well known, reform will raise the basic tax threshold to £20,000. And that won't just benefit young people and modest earners, it will also benefit pensioners who at the moment, if they've got the state pension plus even a very modest occupational pension, can find they're in the tax bracket. So we will make sure that that cannot happen. And that is delivering a fair society. And that is what we're about. We're about fairness. We're about true equality. We're about a true democracy, which means freedom of speech. It means that whether somebody is left-wing or centre or right-wing, as long as they are not trying to incite violence, they can state what they think. And how can it be just? How can we talk about impartial justice when somebody can be charged with a racially aggravated crime or a religiously aggravated crime or whatever it might be, based solely on the perception of the complainant, with no objective evidence? That's not justice. And we'll get rid of that pretty quickly too. That can be done with a very simple change to the legal definitions. So all these things can be done, but we're going to do something else as well. Do you remember something called Brexit? Yes. Anybody know where Brexit is now? Northern Ireland is still subject to vast tranches of EU law. We are still subject to tranches of EU law which haven't been repealed. We, for some reason which I don't understand, this government has shadowed the EU rather than competed with it. The first thing that Hunt and Sunak did when they took office was to put up the level of corporation tax to that of France. Why didn't they reduce it to that of the Irish Republic? It would have been much more sensible. And round here, do you really think we've taken back control of our waters? No. We haven't. And what we have to do, we decide, and we alone decide who fishes in our waters. And when I say we alone, We alone, that is to say Britain, and therefore the British government, must decide on British policy and not be compelled by the World Economic Forum or the World Health Organization. We decide, or our elected government decides, what is best for Britain, and the British people can then decide whether they're right or wrong at the next election. And that is what we wanted from Brexit. Britain running her own affairs. And we still haven't got it. So we'll be doing that as well. Now, I've said several times in the course of this address that we're not going to be able to do all those things on our first day in Parliament, particularly as we will not be the government. But we can start to build on all of that in the minds of the British people. We can start to tell people what it is they have a complete right to expect. And that is what we will fight for in Parliament. Now, there's no doubt this time we're going to get seats. We're going to have a parliamentary presence. And that will give us the power on which to form the basis on which we can then build. Now, whether we do deals with any other party or not depends entirely on what those other parties are offering. And what we do know is we're not going to do any deals with a Conservative Party that pursues its present course. That is absolutely fundamental. So, I'm not going to say to you, go to your constituencies and prepare for government, but I am going to say go to your constituencies and prepare for opposition. Right, questions from anybody at all? And if you want to ask a candidate, just tell me. I'm going to go sir and then madam and then sir. Sir here first. Yes, you sir, there. You, yes.
Right. You're a very common sense person, and that's one of the reasons I like reform, as you've stated. But I am concerned about the sums, the amount that's going to be cut, because we won't be spending it,
yes.
The amount that we're giving away because of taxes, and yet we're going to provide so much more to the country.
Yes.
As a common sense person, do you believe the numbers are?
Yes. The question for those of you who may not heard at the very back is, do I think the numbers add up? That is to say, can we fund the promises that I'm standing here making? We are not Liz Truss. We have seen what happened to Liz Truss, who just placed all her hope in growth. And so therefore we have fully costed the sum of our policies, and we have identified quite clearly how we're going to pay for them. And the biggest source of funding, not the only one, but the biggest source, is very simple, but it's also very complicated. After COVID, Britain was faced, as everybody knows, with trillions of pounds worth of debt. And the way the government managed that situation was that they printed money. We all know they don't call it that, they call it quantitative easing. It means they printed money. But then, for some extraordinary reason, which reform can't understand, they let the banks issue those bonds and then paid the banks interest on the bonds. Now, as Richard Tice has said, it's a bit like giving somebody a fiver and then saying, oh, and how much interest would you like me to pay on it? And that's exactly what the government has done. Now, before you say, we can't reverse that, oh yes, we can. Switzerland reversed it. The European Bank reversed it. The European Bank, mark you. And even the mighty, the infallible, the uncontradictable Robert Peston says it can be done. And of course, if he says it can be done, well, it must be able to be done, mustn't it? But the fact is we've got solid precedents for other very large, wealthy countries that have done it. So we can do it. And that is where most, not all, but most of the savings will be made. So it's okay, sir, we're not promising jam tomorrow without a clue how we're going to bake the scone underneath it. It's okay. Right, now there's a lady. Yep.
What I'd like to ask is your view on the fact, I read a couple of weeks ago that Starmer had been asked if he would accept Palestine as an independent state
Yeah.
to appease the Muslim voters. There were 17 points that were given to him, one being, would he accept Palestine as an independent state to appease the Muslim vote?
Well, I mean, it's not just a question of appeasement, it's a question of trying to get a long-lasting solution. And most politicians start, and I'm talking now about international discussions, most politicians start with the proposition that there should be a two-state solution. Your problem then is identifying and defining the two states. So it's actually quite complex. And I don't think Starmer is out of step in that sense, but I think where he's very badly out of step is he hasn't condemned the marches and the growth of anti-Semitism. But then we know he does have problems of definition. He seriously believes, because he told us, that 10% of women have a male appendage. He must believe that because he told us that 90% of women don't. I mean, actually, we all laugh, and I can understand why. But he's going into number 10. He's going to be the British Prime Minister. He doesn't know what a woman is, and God help us. Right, okay. Sir, over there.
Thanks, Dan. Fully in support of reform. I've got two questions, if you don't mind. One being, I watch a lot of chat on social media. Quite a few people make jibs that, you know, if we vote for reform, it's a conservative morphing into reform. What would you say to them type of people? And the second question is, in regards to the contract, what is mentioned in regards to mental health? Because that kind of gets the comments on social media also.
Okay. First of all, let's start with the question of reform drawing largely from Conservatives. Now, because there is such a lot of disillusionment with the Conservatives at the moment, it is quite undeniable that a large proportion of those coming to us come from reform. But it's also, coming to reform come from the Tories. But it's also the case, quite demonstrably the case, that many are also coming from Labour. Think back to Mrs. Thatcher, and then think back, a lot less in terms of time past, and think of Boris. And think of the two things that they did. Mrs. Thatcher could never have got the majorities that she got if she had not been supported by what is often called the ordinary working man. She couldn't have done it. She needed their support, and she got it because they knew that she was on the side of their aspirations. She wanted them to be able to buy their own houses. She wanted their children to be able to go to independent schools if they were bright enough to benefit from it. She wanted ordinary people to own shares in British businesses. She wanted those things not to be the preserve of the elite. And Boris had a very similar appeal to what is called the Red Wall. His appeal was different. He was going for two things, one Brexit and two levelling up. Now, it is perfectly possible to appeal way beyond the Conservative ranks, and that is what we're doing, and that particularly is what Nigel Farage is doing. Because Nigel Farage, you don't look at Nigel Farage and think, ah, yes, metropolitan elite. That is what you think when you look at David Cameron. It's not something you think when you look at Nigel Farage. So yes, we are drawing from Labour. We are drawing very heavily from the Tories because they're so fed up. But we are also drawing from Labour, And I think you'll find that over the course of the next week, we do try to emphasise rather more what our appeal is to former Labour supporters. Okay, anybody else? Yes, sir, there.
It's a subject people are afraid to talk about because you get your house burnt down. What are you going to do about the Islamisation of Britain? It seems to be a supremacist cult that wants to take us over, they want to impose Sharia law. It's a clear and present danger to the security of this country. Very divisive. Nobody seems to be doing anything about it. These people are not integrating. They have a stated aim that they want to take over the country without reading us. What can you do?
Right. The question, for those of you who may not have heard it at the back, is about sectarianism. It's about the growth of sectarianism, the growth of Islamic fundamentalism. Yeah, I know what you're saying, sir, but it's all part of sectarianism. I mean, just look at the Palestine marches. It's all part of sectarianism and Islamic fundamentalism. Now, let me say this, it is crucial that we recognise that Britain is absolutely full of many perfectly decent Muslims who could actually teach us quite a lot when it comes to family values. But we also know that there is another, and I think you're right, growing section which doesn't share our values, which doesn't want to share our values, and which is extremely militant. Now, I speak with feeling. I have Muslim friends. I'm going to one of their weddings in a few days' time. But I also had my best friend murdered by an Islamic fundamentalist. So I've seen it from both sides. And I just don't want to deny the first in addressing the second. Frankly, when it comes to addressing fundamentalism, you've got to meet it head on. There's no good prevaricating, and the PREVENT programme does a bit too much prevarication. It does a bit too much of it. So, I mean, I think you meet it head on, and I think you challenge it when you meet it. I think you be very alert for it in the schools, which is where it becomes obvious. You're alert for it in some of the mosques, and we challenge it where it occurs. I don't want this country to become sectarian, and that is what will happen if we allow the growth of one particular very extreme view. Sorry, sir, you also asked me about mental health. And you were going to raise your hand at the end and say, you don't care about mental health, do you? You didn't answer me. Let me answer you now. Yes, of course, mental health is important. And what we're doing with the health service in general will mean that we are able to expand those services. But let me also say this. I am tired of hearing, and I say this on behalf of people who do have real mental health problems, I'm tired of hearing every little stress described as mental health problems. We've got to be tougher than that. Stress is a part of ordinary life. We all suffer it, and when we do, we're not having a mental health problem, we're having stress. And it's as normal as that. And actually, I really did take exception. I wrote about it in my Express column. Very good column every Wednesday in the Daily Express. I wrote about it when Prince William, referring to his father's having to shield for less than a week because he tested positive for COVID, and Prince William said, oh, it's bad for his mental health. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. A whole lot of us had to shield from time to time. Wasn't bad for our mental health. Actually, gave me some much-needed time off and I could get things done. I'm sure His Majesty would love some of that. So, we need to keep it in proportion, but you're right, it's important where it's meaningful. Right, okay, yes.
I don't know whether you're aware, but less than half a mile from here.
Less than half a
mile from this place, British taxpayer is paying for 250 Afghan interpreters.
Yes.
Some of whom actually speak in English. homeless veterans.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? What
Right.
are we going to do about this situation?
Okay, before I turn my attention to the veterans, let me just comment on Afghan interpreters. And let me say very clearly, I said this in my Express column as well, we let down the Afghan interpreters. We had years in which to sort out those who were in danger and to get them over here in an orderly, organised fashion. We didn't jolly well do it. And what then happened was that America pulled out at the last moment, and we had that massive panic. Do you remember the pictures of the planes and people? And you hadn't even tested the bona fides of all the people because we hadn't done it in an organised fashion. Our fault entirely. And I said it not once, not twice, but probably a dozen times in my Express column throughout those years. What are we doing about the people who put their lives on the line for us? And unlike most asylum seekers, they're very identifiable because their commanding officers would know who they were. You could identify them, and we didn't do it. And we had a huge disorganised chaos at the end, in which some of those who were utterly genuine were left behind to the mercy of the Taliban. So I'm not proud of our record on that score. But what I am not proud of as well is the way that we treat our veterans. And we treat them appallingly. You, sir, talked about mental health. The mental health crisis among veterans has to be seen to be believed. Now, it's bad enough, to have been through what they've been through, some of whom manage it, some don't. But it's bad enough to have been through that without then finding that you're in a society which actually doesn't care twopence. And that is something we have to address. It's something Nigel Farage has said very clearly we will address. We will, address the depleted state of our armed services. And, of course, one of the reasons... And one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why people don't want to join up is that they don't believe we'll look after them properly afterwards. And it's as simple as that. I have... Sorry, were you addressing me?
This is our last question now, if that's okay.
Maybe. I have a great nephew, by which I mean he is my great nephew, not that I have a nephew who is great. I have a great nephew who wants to be, he's now doing A-levels, he wants to be a combat medic. I think that is a fantastic ambition. But I also know that if anything does go wrong, and if he is in action, and if anything goes wrong subsequently, he's got family backup. And not everybody has that, and we need to be aware of it. Now, what I'm going to do, because I've been told to shut up by that chap over there, what I'm going to do is to ask if there's anybody else who wants to ask a question, and then I'm going to take them all together, so don't ask too many. Who would like? Now, I'm going to give you numbers, don't cheat. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Number 1, your question.
What are we doing about the WHO pandemic treaty?
Well, as I've already said, reform does not believe in globalisation, and we will decide ourselves how we deal with future pandemics. Unfortunately, I can't bind Starmer to that, but we can reverse what he does. 2.
When you are in government, when it will happen, how fast do you think you can get out of the ECHR?
Very, very soon. It's easy enough. You repudiate the treaty. It was formed for a completely different set of circumstances from the one we've got now. We were instrumental in its formation. It was a different world. Now we can say enough. We're going to have to say enough to a lot of things. 3. Come on, sir, 3. Sorry.
How do we stop Starmer from giving the vote to EU citizens so he can get us back in the EU?
You can't stop Starmer from A, giving the vote to 16-year-olds.
No, not 16.
I know, I've said A, giving the vote to 16-year-olds, and B, giving the vote to EU citizens, and C, giving the vote to anybody else he wants to. You can't actually stop a government from doing that. You don't need a referendum to do it. And it is very hard. I mean, the EU citizens bit is not so hard, but it will be immensely hard to turn round, a government of the future, to turn round and say to 16-year-olds, we're taking away your vote.
No, but what the man has, he's trying to take us back to the EU.
Yeah, I know. Of course he is. Of course he is. He has said very clearly that we won't formally rejoin the EU, but as I've always said, there are two ways of rejoining. One is formally, which we're never going to do because we'd have to have the euro and everything else. But the second is simply by shadowing the EU and by accepting its laws. And for that, you don't need a referendum. So, it's tough. So we're going to get it. We're going to get that from Starmer. But in 2029, when you have a reform government, that we can reverse. Well,
my question is what the lady was asking about the ECHR. Now, from what I'm saying here, because I had a bit of a discussion with somebody on Facebook, and he said you've got to go through Parliament, and it's not only that, it's a relationship with Ireland and how we're going to get out of all these treaties that we've got.
Well, as I've said, there is no such thing as a treaty which cannot be repudiated. There is no such thing. And therefore, we will have to get out of it. It will be a bit more subtle than that. We won't just arrive and say, all these treaties are torn up and here's a bonfire. But we will say, we're ending this, and now let's work out how we end it, and end it quickly. We'll do that. We'll do that. I've got so many people claiming to be five. Okay, sir, 5.5, but can I just take 5 first? Yeah, quick, otherwise we'll all be thrown out. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot happened over the pandemic years. I'm just wanting to offer my thoughts and opinions.
Could you do it very quickly?
Holistic and spirituality. We've lost millions of people through illness and ill health with the pandemic. Questions about Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson's behaviour, and actually Sadiq Khan in London. I'm actually disgusted with them all. What please will happen to them? And what is Boris Johnson doing right now, getting back in, stirring up the pot with Nigel Farage?
Well, what Boris Johnson is doing right now is earning money. That's what he's doing right now. What his future plans are politically, I don't know. Can I just take that as a comment? And 5.5, you are the last one.
Okay. I think we all agree the welfare state has grown to such a size.
Yeah. Yes.
How are we going to ensure that the welfare state helps those who are in desperate need and is not a handout to people who could well do for themselves in the way we
I haven't got long enough to go into the sort of detail that I would like to go into, but let me put it this way. Our National Health Service is a 1940s institution trying to cope with the 2024 situation. And it isn't geared up to it. It never was. I mean, Bevan did not realise that longevity was about to increase from 69 years for a woman to today's 83. He didn't know that there would be replacements for all manner of joints. He didn't know that we would gradually get treatment for cancer. He didn't know those things. And so the system he designed was designed for the 1940s. And I've been saying for years, sir, and I say it again, that, and I do mean years, about 30 years I've been saying this quite publicly, what we need is a proper debate asking a very simple question, but which won't produce a simple answer, which is if we were starting again now, knowing what we know now, how would we shape a National Health Service? And finally, in response to your question about those who can afford it, one of our problems is that we have, over the years, come to confuse Bevan's vision with the vehicle he chose to deliver it. The vision, I'm sure we all share. Nobody should ever be denied health services simply because they can't afford it. The vehicle he chose to deliver that was therefore everything free at the point of reception. That vehicle has broken down, and we need to work out how to fix it without losing the vision. I want my handbag, so thank you very much.
Can we just have another round of applause for our amazing woman? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So just to briefly finish off, for Mark and myself, Blackpool South, Blackpool North, thank you to all those who are supporting us at the moment with volunteering. We really need your help and it's really appreciated. If any of you would like to get involved and you're not already, please come and see us after this event closes. And thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, Anne. Wonderful. Thanks everybody for being here. If you want to keep up to date with us, follow us on the social media pages. If there's anything you want to ask, then send the questions out to us if you don't get to us today. Dan and I are very accessible. All you've got to do is send us your number if you want a phone call. You know, if you want to come and help us, you can get involved in coming out canvassing with us. It's been very exciting speaking to the residents. It really does give you a great understanding of where we are. So thanks everybody. Thank you for being here. Thanks to the Savoy and all the staff. And Spencer and all the guys who helped out. Thank you very much. God bless.